Nobody thought Lil Durk would walk away from this. Everything pointed to the end, until one move flipped the entire case overnight. A new lawyer steps in, the narrative shifts, and suddenly he's back home. No explanation, no warning. So what really happened behind the scenes? Nobody believed it at first. Not the blogs, not the fans, not even people inside the industry who usually catch things before they explode. Because from the outside it looked finished, locked, closed, a situation that had already reached its final chapter. But then everything shifted. Overnight. And the name at the center of it all was Lil Durk. An artist who has lived his entire career under pressure that most people would never survive, suddenly found himself in a situation that insiders were calling different. Not louder, not messier, different in a way that felt final. At first, the talk was dismissal, standard noise, another rumor cycle, another wave of internet speculation that would fade in 24 hours, but then something changed in the tone. Insiders started saying something that made people stop scrolling. He's not coming back from this. Not it's serious, not it's complicated, but that direct, heavy kind of statement that usually only comes when people see an outcome forming behind closed doors. And just when the narrative felt like it was stabilizing in one direction, something unexpected happened. A new lawyer entered the picture. No press rollout, no public announcement, no media buildup, just a quiet shift behind the scenes that nobody was supposed to notice until the results started showing. And that's when the energy flipped. Suddenly, filings looked different. Arguments started changing tone. Decisions that once felt locked began getting challenged in ways that didn't make sense unless you knew something had changed at the strategy level. People close to the situation described it as a reset. And then came the moment that detonated everything online. Lil Durk back home. No long explanation, no breakdown of proceedings, no visible roadmap of how things got from point A to point B, just a result that arrived like a shockwave. And the internet did what it always does when answers don't come with clarity. It filled the silence with theories. Because people paying attention knew this wasn't supposed to happen quickly, not with this kind of case, not with this level of attention, not without something major shifting behind the curtain. So the questions came fast. Was it legal strategy? Was it leverage? Was it connections nobody is talking about publicly? Or was it something deeper, something structured in the background long before the headlines caught up? And then the whispers started again. This new lawyer didn't just defend the case, they reworked it. Not small adjustments, not procedural fixes, but a full strategic rebuild, changing angles, reframing narratives, highlighting weaknesses in places nobody expected, and according to some insiders, possibly exposing inconsistencies that were never supposed to become visible. If even partially true, that changes everything. Because then this stops being a simple legal win and starts looking like a calculated correction of a system that was already moving in one direction. And that's why people online are divided. Some call it a comeback story, others call it a behind-the-scenes power shift, but almost everyone agrees on one thing. Something happened that the public didn't see. But to understand why this moment hit so hard, you can't start in the courtroom. You have to go back. Way back. Because Lil Durk didn't arrive in this moment out of nowhere. His entire career has been built under pressure most artists never openly talk about. He came into music not polished, not packaged, not protected by industry distance. He came in real, raw, direct. And that authenticity is exactly what made people connect with him in the first place. But authenticity comes with weight. Because the same real-life experiences that made his music powerful also kept him close to environments and histories that never fully disappeared. Old tensions, old relationships, Old stories that never stopped following him, even when the spotlight got bigger. And over time, those shadows stopped being background noise and started becoming part of the narrative around him. Fans noticed it early. Certain lyrics that felt too specific. Certain posts that felt too pointed. Certain moments where the energy online shifted from admiration to concern. Not loud concern, the quiet kind. The kind people don't always say out loud but keep in the back of their mind. Something might come back around. And eventually, according to sources, it did. The situation that brought him into legal pressure wasn't something that appeared overnight. It had been building in fragments, slowly, quietly, across time. Until it wasn't quiet anymore. Once it surfaced publicly, everything changed shape. Because legal systems don't care about perception, they don't care about fan loyalty, they don't care about image. They operate on structure, evidence, and argument. And suddenly, Durk was in a space where none of the usual rules of influence applied. At first, the outlook wasn't optimistic. Reports suggested the situation was tight. Options were limited. The kind of language that usually signals pressure closing in rather than opening up. Online, the reaction mirrored it. People weren't debating if it was serious anymore. They were debating how serious. Some said it looked over. Others said it was only beginning. But the uncertainty itself was what made it explode. Because in moments like this, silence becomes louder than any statement. And then something interesting happened behind the scenes. Even though Durk already had legal representation, people close to the situation started noticing friction. Not public conflict, not visible disagreement, but subtle indicators that the strategy wasn't landing the way it needed to. Moves that didn't shift momentum. Arguments that didn't change direction. Delays that started feeling less like caution and more like stagnation. And in high-stakes legal environments, time isn't neutral. Time is pressure. Every delay adds weight. Every misstep narrows options. And according to whispers, that's when concern started building internally. Because people close to him could see the trajectory wasn't improving, it was tightening. Then came the pivot. The arrival of new legal strategy changed everything almost immediately. Not because the facts changed overnight, but because the framing did. And in cases like this, framing can be everything. Because once a narrative shifts inside a courtroom environment, everything connected to it starts shifting too. That's why the outcome felt so sudden to the public. But behind the scenes, it wasn't sudden at all. It was a rebuild happening out of view. And when the result finally surfaced, Lil Durk back home wasn't just a headline. It was the visible end of an invisible sequence of moves most people never saw. But now the internet is left with something it hates most. A gap between what happened and what was explained. And in that gap, theories grow. Because some people believe this is a straightforward legal victory. Others believe it signals something far more complex happening behind closed doors in how high-profile cases are managed, influenced, and resolved. And then there's the most uncomfortable question of all. If this case shifted this fast once, what actually made it shift? Because nothing this size moves without pressure somewhere in the system. And that's the part people can't stop thinking about. Not just what happened, but what made it happen. And now, even though the headline has already landed, the story doesn't feel finished. It feels like the beginning of something that hasn't fully revealed itself yet. And the next layer, whenever it surfaces, might finally answer the question everyone is already asking. What really changed behind the scenes that nobody is being told about? Nobody inside that courtroom said it out loud at first. Nobody wanted to be the one to break the silence, but everyone felt it the second the new lawyer stepped in. Because this wasn't supposed to happen like this. For weeks, the case around Lil Durk had been building in one direction, tightening, closing in. Every headline, every update, every leaked detail painted the same picture. Pressure mounting, options shrinking, outcomes looking more and more locked in. People online had already made up their minds. Industry voices were cautious. Insiders were whispering the same thing in different ways. This isn't something he walks away from clean. And then suddenly, the entire rhythm changed. Not with a press conference, not with an announcement, not with any public statement at all. It started with a name nobody was really talking about yet. A new lawyer. At first, it looked routine, almost boring. A standard legal switch that happens in high-profile cases all the time when strategy needs adjusting or pressure gets too heavy. But behind the scenes, this wasn't routine at all. The energy shifted immediately. People close to the situation started noticing it before the public did. The tone of conversations changed. The confidence inside the opposing side didn't feel as solid as it used to. Arguments that once sounded final suddenly started getting questioned in real time. And quietly, almost invisibly, momentum began to move. At first, it was subtle, small adjustments, new questions raised, old assumptions challenged. Evidence that everyone had already accepted without debate suddenly got pulled back into discussion. And once that starts happening in a legal environment like this, nothing stays stable for long. Because doubt spreads faster than certainty. Inside the courtroom, the shift became impossible to ignore. The new lawyer didn't walk in cautiously. They didn't ease into the case. They came in controlled, focused, and almost unsettlingly confident. And instead of playing defense like everyone expected, they flipped the direction entirely. They started attacking the structure of the case itself. Not emotionally, not theatrically, strategically. Procedures were questioned. Evidence handling was challenged. Statements that had been treated as solid were re-examined under a completely different lens. And suddenly, what looked like a finished narrative started looking incomplete. The room felt it instantly. Opposing attorneys had to adjust on the fly. Arguments that had been reliable weren't landing the same way anymore. Even observers in the courtroom could sense the tension building with every exchange. But the real turning point came when the focus shifted to timing. Because once timing gets challenged in a legal case, everything else becomes unstable. The lawyer started breaking down sequences, pointing out inconsistencies that had been overlooked, gaps in explanations that didn't line up cleanly anymore once you slowed everything down. And at first, people thought it was just aggressive defense strategy. Until it was. Because then came something that wasn't expected. New information. Not speculation, not rumor. Something that, according to those present, had not been part of the original discussion at all. And that changed the temperature in the room completely. Because now the question wasn't just whether the case was strong. It was whether the case had been fully built on complete information in the first place. And once that kind of doubt enters a courtroom, it doesn't leave easily. Outside the courtroom, the shift was even more noticeable. Online narratives started bending. Posts that were once confident started disappearing. Accounts that were loud suddenly went quiet. Even commentary pages that had been pushing a strong angle started softening their language. Less certainty, more hesitation. And people noticed. Because the internet doesn't just consume updates, it reads tone. And the tone had changed. Inside the case, the most aggressive move came next. A motion was filed. On the surface, that sounds procedural, routine, standard legal movement. But the scope of this one wasn't standard at all. It didn't aim for a small correction or delay. It went straight at the foundation. It challenged how evidence was collected. It questioned whether proper legal procedures were followed from the start. It raised the possibility that key material in the case might not even hold up under scrutiny. And when something like that gets filed, everything pauses. Because if even part of it succeeds, the structure of the entire case doesn't just adjust, it destabilizes. Inside the courtroom, the reaction was immediate. A shift in posture, a change in pacing, a sense that the dynamic was no longer predictable. Even the judge reportedly took a moment before responding, as if recalibrating the weight of what had just been placed in front of the court. This wasn't routine anymore. This was pressure changing shape. And while all of that was happening inside, something else was unfolding outside at the same time. Public perception was splitting. One side still believed the situation was tightening and the outcome was inevitable. The other side started questioning everything they thought they understood about the case. And in the middle of it all, Lil Durk remained the central focus, but no longer in the same way. Because now the conversation wasn't just about what he was accused of or what he was facing. It was about whether the foundation of the entire situation was as solid as people originally believed. Then came the leak. Not a rumor, not a screenshot, not a vague claim. A document. Something structured. Something that looked official enough to immediately trigger confusion and concern across social media. It referenced claims, procedures, and individuals connected to the broader case. Some names were hidden, others partially visible, but the implications were enough to send the internet into overdrive. People weren't arguing casually anymore. They were analyzing, breaking it down, zooming in, comparing language, looking for inconsistencies, trying to decide whether what they were seeing was real, altered, or completely misinterpreted. And that's when everything escalated again. Because now the situation wasn't just legal. It was public. And once something enters both spaces at the same time, it stops being controllable. Then came the response inside the courtroom to the motion. And that's where things truly shifted again. Because instead of a simple denial or quick dismissal, the court acknowledged parts of the challenge in a way that changed the energy completely. Nothing was fully overturned, nothing was erased. But certain elements that were once treated as solid were suddenly no longer untouchable. And that alone changed everything. Because in legal battles like this, perception is power. And once perception cracks, the entire narrative becomes unstable. Outside, the internet reacted instantly. People started rethinking everything. Old confidence disappeared. New theories emerged. Suddenly, the story was case closed anymore. It was what happens next. And behind the scenes, insiders started hinting at something even bigger. That this new legal strategy might not just be defending against the case, but actively exposing flaws in how the case was built from the beginning. If that turns out to be true, then this isn't just a defense story. It's a reversal, a shift in direction that no one publicly saw coming. And now, everything is waiting for the next move. Because the case didn't end. It opened up. And what comes next could either close it for good or change everything people thought they understood about it from the start. The moment that courtroom energy shifted, it didn't just change the case. It changed the entire temperature of the room. Because what looked solid a few days ago was suddenly starting to fracture in real time. And once that kind of crack appears in a legal battle, it never stays small for long. Now imagine being on the other side of it. You've built your entire argument carefully, every detail placed where it belongs, every statement aligned, every piece of evidence presented like a finished puzzle. You believe it's airtight. Then one detail gets questioned. Then another. Then suddenly, the foundation doesn't feel as stable as it did before. That's exactly what insiders say started happening the moment the new defense strategy fully kicked in. Because this wasn't just a lawyer stepping in to help. This was a complete shift in how the case was being attacked and rebuilt from the inside out. The new legal team didn't ease into it. They escalated. They went straight back to the timeline, but this time with a different level of intensity. Every sequence of events was broken down again. Every statement was re-examined. Every detail that had once been treated as final was pulled back into question. But the difference now was critical. The court had already shown it was willing to listen. And that changed everything. Because once a judge signals that doubt is valid, even slightly, the entire structure of certainty starts to shake. So the defense didn't hold back. They started cross-referencing details that had previously been ignored. They highlighted gaps in the narrative. They pointed out inconsistencies that didn't seem important before, but now suddenly mattered a lot. And then came the shift that nobody expected. They didn't just argue that something didn't happen. They argued something much stronger, that it couldn't have happened the way it was being described. And that single change in framing is where everything flipped. Because denial can be debated, but impossibility forces reevaluation. Once that idea enters the room, every detail has to prove itself again under pressure. Every claim has to survive scrutiny from a completely new angle. And according to those watching closely, some of those claims didn't hold up the same way anymore. Now, while all of this was happening inside the courtroom, the outside world started catching on. At first, it was subtle. A headline here, a blog post there. Then it became more obvious. Case takes unexpected turn. Defense raises new questions. Legal strategy shifts momentum. And that's when people realize something had changed. Because once the public narrative starts bending, the pressure doesn't just stay inside the courtroom anymore. It spreads outward. Suddenly, perception becomes part of the battle. And controlling perception becomes just as important as controlling evidence. But through all of it, Lil Durk stayed silent. No posts, no interviews, no emotional statements, no public reaction at all. Just silence. And strangely enough, that silence started working in his favor. Because while everything around him was getting louder, more chaotic, more uncertain, he wasn't reacting to it. And in situations like this, silence doesn't look like weakness. It looks like patience, like calculation, like someone waiting for something to unfold. And that's exactly what made people uneasy. Because it suggested he might know more than he was saying. Then came the moment that shifted everything again. According to multiple insider accounts, the new legal strategy didn't just weaken arguments. It forced a deeper reassessment of how the case itself was structured. Not just details, not just evidence, but direction. And after that shift, things started moving in ways nobody publicly expected. Discussions changed tone, decisions started getting revisited, and then came the headline that instantly took over the internet. Lil Durk back home. No long explanation, no breakdown, just results. And that's what made it explode. Because nobody was prepared for it to happen that quickly. One moment the narrative was tightening, the next moment it cracked open. And instantly, the internet split in two. One side treated it like a victory, a comeback, a moment of relief. Fans celebrating, saying he beat the odds, that the system didn't hold, that the support paid off. They weren't just reacting to news. They were reacting emotionally, like something personal had just been restored. But the other side wasn't convinced. Not even close. They called it too fast, too clean, too unclear. They asked the questions nobody could answer yet. What changed? What was uncovered? Why did it move this quickly? And that uncertainty kept the tension alive. Because when a situation resolves faster than expected, people don't always see closure. Sometimes they see missing information. And that's where the debate started. Not small arguments anymore. Full-scale online battles. Threads breaking down timelines. Videos analyzing courtroom behavior. Comment sections turning into investigations. Everyone trying to understand what actually happened. And that's when the industry started reacting too. Some artists stayed subtle. A repost here, a quiet message there, a symbolic gesture that didn't explain anything but still said enough. Others stayed completely silent. And that silence stood out even more. Because in moments like this, absence becomes noticeable. People start asking why certain voices aren't speaking, why certain names are avoiding the conversation, why reactions aren't as uniform as expected. And that adds another layer of tension on top of everything else. Meanwhile, insiders started hinting that the real shift wasn't just courtroom strategy. It was what the lawyer may have uncovered while digging deeper. Something not fully public. Something not fully explained. Something that might have forced a reconsideration of how the entire situation was being viewed from the beginning. And if that's true, then the courtroom result isn't the end of the story. It's just the visible part. Because underneath it, there may still be unresolved pieces waiting to surface. And that's what keeps the situation unstable. Even after the headline, even after the reaction, even after the apparent outcome. Because now the real question isn't what happened in court. It's what hasn't been revealed yet. And more importantly, what happens when it finally is. The silence online wasn't normal anymore. It had that strange weight to it. Because in situations like this, people don't usually go quiet unless something is shifting underneath the surface. And that's exactly what people started noticing. Why weren't certain voices speaking? Why were some names completely avoiding the conversation? Why did the loudest commentators suddenly go silent at the exact moment the narrative started flipping? Those questions spread fast. And once they did, the focus expanded far beyond Lil Durk. It wasn't just about him anymore. It became about everyone connected to him. Every past collaboration, every friendship, every public appearance, every moment that could now be reinterpreted under a new lens. People started digging. Not casually either. Deep digging. Old interviews resurfaced. Photos were pulled back up. Lyrics were reanalyzed like evidence. Even harmless moments were being studied like they meant something more. Because the internet had shifted into investigation mode. And when that happens, nothing stays private in peace anymore. Meanwhile, media outlets were scrambling to keep pace. At first, they framed it one way. Durk facing serious situation. Then that tone changed. Unexpected development in case. Then again, defense strategy raises new questions. You could see the uncertainty creeping into the language itself. Because when the narrative starts moving faster than the reporting, the headlines stop being confident. They become cautious. And that caution tells its own story. Inside the courtroom situation, something similar was happening. The case wasn't just being defended anymore. It was being challenged in its structure. And that's where things got dangerous for anyone trying to predict the outcome. Because once a legal strategy starts shifting perception, the entire foundation of certainty begins to move. And right in the middle of all of this pressure, one detail started circulating quietly. Almost like a rumor that didn't want to be loud yet. The new lawyer might not be finished. Not even close. Because according to whispers from inside circles, what had happened so far was only the beginning of a larger plan. A reset, a repositioning, a setup for something more aggressive. And if that was true, then the case people thought they understood was only halfway revealed. Because defense doesn't always stay defense. Sometimes it turns into something else entirely. Something offensive. Something disruptive. Something designed not just to respond, but to expose. And that idea alone changed how people were reading everything. Because now, every move didn't feel like reaction. It felt like preparation. Then came Anat. Her rumor. Stronger this time. More specific. Something bigger was about to surface. No details, no confirmation. Just enough tension to make people feel like the next shift wasn't going to be small. And they were right. Because just when attention started to settle, the internet got hit again. Late night. Low activity. Then suddenly, something surfaced. A clip. Short, grainy, no clear context. But powerful enough to immediately reignite everything. Nobody officially confirmed its origin. But insiders quickly started connecting it to the same situation that brought Durk into the spotlight in the first place. And that's what made it dangerous. Not because it proved something directly, but because it didn't need to. It raised questions. And in moments like this, questions are enough to restart chaos. People began replaying it obsessively. Zooming in. Enhancing audio. Freezing frames. Trying to decode meaning from fragments. Is this real? Is this edited? Is this relevant? Or is it noise designed to distract? But by now, one thing was clear. Nothing appearing in this situation felt random anymore. Everything felt placed. Everything felt timed. Everything felt like it had intent behind it. And just as the clip started spreading, another whisper entered the conversation. Not about evidence this time, but about the lawyer. Because according to multiple unverified but persistent sources, the same lawyer who had shifted the momentum inside the courtroom might be preparing something far bigger. Not defense, not rebuttal, but escalation. And that idea changed everything again. Because up until now, every move had been reactive. Responding, countering, challenging. But an offensive legal move changes the entire structure of a case. It means not just defending a position, but questioning the system that built the position in the first place. And that's where the rumors got even more serious. Because insiders began suggesting that while reviewing details, something may have been uncovered that extends beyond Lil Durk's immediate situation. Something involving other names, other connections, other events that haven't been publicly discussed. Unmentioned figures, unreleased details, unseen links. And if even part of that is true, then the story everyone thinks they're watching is only the surface layer. Then came the message. Allegedly leaked, unverified, but spreading fast enough to get attention across platforms. One line stood out more than anything else. They didn't expect us to look this deep. No explanation, no context, but it landed heavily because of timing alone. Because now the question wasn't just what happened in court. It became what was found during preparation. And more importantly, who might be affected if it continues to surface. That's where the stakes shifted again. Because once a case starts touching information beyond its original scope, it stops being isolated. It starts expanding. Then another rumor surfaced. This one even more unexpected. Lil Durk himself might speak. Not through legal channels, not through intermediaries, but directly. A full statement, possibly even a video. And that possibility alone shifted the atmosphere again. Because so far, the legal system had been speaking for him. His silence had been part of the strategy. But the moment he speaks personally, everything changes. Narrative control shifts instantly. Perception shifts instantly. Interpretation becomes personal instead of procedural. And that's where things become unpredictable. Because no lawyer can fully control how a personal statement is received. Then came the most unsettling realization of all. There are still people connected to this situation who haven't spoken at all. Not publicly, not even indirectly. Just watching, waiting, observing how the situation unfolds before deciding whether to step forward. And according to whispers, that silence isn't accidental. It's strategic. Because some voices are waiting to see which direction the pressure moves before they decide what to reveal. And that means one thing. This is still unstable, still unfolding, still incomplete. Because if even one of those silent voices comes forward with real information, the entire structure could shift again. Not slightly, completely. And that's why the internet can't settle. Why the conversation keeps restarting. Why every update feels like it's not the final one. Because the truth is, this isn't closing. It's opening. And what happens next might not just continue the story. It might rewrite it entirely.